The sun had just set on the Grand Space Station as Captain Elias Storm walked down the long metallic hallway. His boots echoed through the silent corridors, each step carrying the weight of his mission. He had been selected to represent Earth in peace talks with the Galactic Empire, a powerful alien race that had long looked down on humanity. The last thing he expected was to be on a diplomatic mission, but Earth had no choice. A fragile peace had been threatened, and Elias was Earth's best soldier, a man known for his strength, courage, and above all, his unwavering determination. As he approached the conference room, Elias felt a strange sense of unease. The air was thick with tension. This wasn't just any peace mission. It was one where the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The alien empire was technologically far more advanced than Earth, and they had never seen humanity as a true threat. But Earth had its own strength, one that wasn't measured in technology alone. It was the heart of humanity, the resilience to survive against all odds. The massive doors slid open, and Elias stepped into the room. His eyes scanned the grand chamber, filled with towering alien figures, each more intimidating than the last. The high ceiling gleamed with artificial lights, casting a cold, sterile glow across the room. At the far end of the chamber stood the alien princess, Seraphia, daughter of the Galactic Empire's ruling family. She was everything Elias had imagined, graceful, powerful, and poised. Yet there was something more in her presence. It was like she carried the weight of an entire galaxy on her shoulders. Her regal attire shimmered in the light, and her eyes, cold and calculating, narrowed as they locked onto Elias. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Seraphia composed herself, but Elias could feel the shift in the air, as if something between them had already begun to change. He had been trained to remain calm in the face of danger, but even he could not ignore the intensity of her gaze. The princess had heard of Earth's soldiers, humans who fought fiercely despite their lack of advanced technology. But nothing prepared her for the man standing before her. Elias was unlike anyone she had met before. Her advisors were talking, exchanging data on human technology, and debating the terms of the peace talks. But all Seraphia could do was focus on Elias. His presence was magnetic. His height, broad shoulders, and the weight of his armor only added to the aura of power he exuded. But it wasn't just his physical strength. It was something deeper. Elias stood as a reminder to her that humanity was far more than the machines they used. There was something human about him, something raw and untamed. Elias stood tall, his face set with a serious expression, though his sharp eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity. He had heard many things about the alien races, especially the empire Seraphia belonged to. The stories painted a picture of an empire that ruled with cold logic and ruthless efficiency. But now, standing before their princess, he realized how different this situation was. It wasn't just a political game, it was personal. Her gaze felt like it could pierce right through him, reading his every thought, every emotion. Despite the tension, Elias remained calm. He was no stranger to high-pressure situations. His mind stayed focused on the mission: ensure Earth's survival, make an alliance if possible, or at the very least, secure a ceasefire. He bowed slightly in respect, acknowledging the princess's presence. "Princess Seraphia," he said with authority, his voice firm yet respectful. Seraphia did not speak immediately. She had been trained to be the perfect leader, stoic, unshakable, and in control of every situation. But this human soldier was challenging that control. She had never met someone so completely self-assured, someone who seemed unaffected by the power of her people. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she examined him, trying to read what made him so different. Her advisors continued to speak, but Seraphia's attention was completely focused on Elias. There was something captivating about him, something that made her forget the politics and the grand strategies that had governed her life up until now. She had always seen herself as the future ruler of an empire that would dominate the galaxy. But now, she felt as though she was face to face with something far more dangerous than any enemy fleet, an unpredictable human soldier whose very presence. Seraphia remained silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She had always trusted Zora, but this was something she couldn't put into words. How could she explain the confusion that had taken root in her heart? She wasn't sure if she even understood it herself. "I've been thinking about the humans," Seraphia finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain Elias Storm. He's not like any soldier I've ever met. He doesn't rely on technology or weapons or any of the things we value in the Empire. He relies on something else, something I don't fully understand." Zora raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She had always believed in the strength of the Empire, its technology, its fleets, and its unshakable power. She had never given much thought to humanity or its resilience. But now, seeing Seraphia's uncertainty, she felt a strange shift in the air. "Your Highness," Zora said cautiously, "are you questioning our power? Our empire has stood for centuries. We have the strength to crush any threat. You cannot allow the words of a single human soldier to sway you." Seraphia shook her head, frustration building inside her. "It's not just his words, Zora. It's his presence. The way he fought beside us during the attack. The way he sacrificed himself for a cause he believed in. He has no fleet, no advanced technology, and yet he is more powerful than any army we have ever faced." Zora was silent for a moment, her mind racing. She had always seen strength in technology, in the power to control. But Seraphia's words were starting to make her wonder if there was something more. Could it be that the humans, with their simple yet powerful resolve, had something the Empire lacked? Could it be that their strength wasn't just in their weapons, but in something deeper, something more human? "I will not be swayed by sentiment," Seraphia said firmly, trying to regain her composure. "The Empire must remain strong, and the peace talks must continue. We cannot afford to show weakness." Zora nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had always believed in Seraphia's strength, but now she wondered if the princess was beginning to question everything she had been taught. As the days passed, the peace talks became even more strained. The Empire's representatives pushed for more control, more power, while Earth's diplomats fought to preserve their autonomy. But no matter how the talks went, Seraphia found it harder to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Elias had shown her a different side of humanity, a side that she could not dismiss. And now, every decision she made felt more difficult. The weight of her responsibility as a leader was heavy, but the realization that her beliefs might not be the whole truth made it even heavier. Seraphia could no longer deny it. The human soldier, with his courage and unwavering spirit, had begun to change her. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for that change. It was supposed to be just another quiet day at the space station. The ongoing peace talks between Earth and a galactic empire were tense, but the diplomats had managed to keep things civil. Seraphia had spent the last few days reflecting on the strange connection she felt to Captain Elias Storm. Despite the galaxy's vast power and the Empire's superiority, Elias's presence had a strange effect on her, something she couldn't ignore any longer. It was a mixture of respect, admiration, and even something deeper, something more personal, but she had pushed those thoughts aside for the moment. The future of the Empire was at stake, and she couldn't afford to let emotions interfere. That was when it happened. Without warning, alarms began blaring throughout the station, the shrill sound cutting through the stillness of the peaceful negotiations. The bright lights flickered, and the walls seemed to pulse with the sudden tension in the air. Seraphia's heart raced as the reality of the situation set in. An enemy fleet had arrived, and they were not here for peace talks. The space station, once a symbol of hope, was now a target. A voice crackled through the intercom system, the tone cold and urgent. "All personnel, this is not a drill. An unidentified fleet is entering our sector. Brace for impact." Seraphia stood frozen, her mind racing. The Empire had never anticipated an attack of this scale, especially not here, in the heart of their diplomatic efforts. Her first instinct was to order an immediate response, But she quickly realized that their military might had been spread thin across other parts of the galaxy. The peace talks had left them vulnerable. She turned to her advisors, but before she could speak, Captain Elias Storm appeared in the doorway, his face set with determination. Despite the chaos unfolding around them, he remained calm. He was a soldier, trained for moments like this. "Princess," he said, his voice steady, "you need to get to the command center. This station isn't safe anymore." Seraphia's eyes widened as she looked at him. She had been trained to rule, to command armies, but she had never faced an attack like this. She had always relied on the power of the Empire to protect her, but now she was beginning to see that it wasn't enough. Elias, a human with no fleet and no advanced technology, had a strength she couldn't understand. And right now, she needed that strength more than ever. "We don't have much time," Elias continued, his voice urgent. "I'll get you to safety, but we need to move quickly. This station is about to be destroyed." Seraphia didn't hesitate. She trusted him, even though she barely knew him. She nodded and followed Elias as he led her through the corridors of the station. The alarms continued to wail, but Elias's presence seemed to bring a sense of calm to the chaos. He moved quickly, his eyes scanning every corner, every hallway, as if he could sense the danger before it arrived. The attack came without warning. Explosions rocked the station, and the walls trembled beneath their feet. The enemy fleet had begun their assault. The air was filled with the sound of weapons fire and the cries of panic from the station's crew. Seraphia's heart pounded in her chest as she ran beside Elias, feeling the intensity of the moment in every step. This was no longer a diplomatic mission. It was survival. Elias led them into a secure room, locking the door behind them. For a brief moment, there was silence, but the calm didn't last long. The station's shields were failing, and the attack was intensifying. Seraphia could feel the vibrations in the air as the enemy ships fired relentlessly upon the station's hull. She had always been told that the Empire's power was unbeatable, but now, standing in the heart of the chaos, she realized how fragile that belief had been. "What's happening?" Seraphia asked, her voice trembling slightly as she looked at Elias. "We're under attack by the Draxar," Elias replied, his face grim. "They're a ruthless species, known for their strength and ability to strike without warning. They've likely been planning this for months. We need to fight back, but first, we need to secure the station's command center. Without it, we're helpless." Seraphia nodded, her thoughts racing. She had to make a decision, and she knew that every second counted. The Draxar were not an enemy to be underestimated. Their technology was advanced, and they were known for their brutal tactics. But even in the face of such danger, Seraphia felt a strange sense of calm. Elias was here. The human soldier had become more than just a protector. He had become a symbol of hope in the midst of the Empire's downfall. "How can I help?" Seraphia asked, her voice steady. Elias glanced at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to offer help, especially not with everything happening around them. But the princess was different. She wasn't just a leader who gave orders from the safety of her command center. She was someone who was willing to fight when it mattered most. "You stay here," Elias said, his voice firm but kind. "I'll take care of the Draxar forces. You'll be safer in this room until we can get the station's shields back online." But Seraphia wasn't going to sit idly by. She had already seen the humanity in Elias, his bravery, his unshakable resolve, and she couldn't allow herself to hide while he risked his life for her. "No," she said firmly. "I'm coming with you." Elias hesitated for a moment but then nodded. He knew that once Seraphia made up her mind, there was no stopping her. And honestly, he respected her determination. "All right," he said. "Stick close to me, and don't hesitate. We fight together, or we don't fight at all." With that, they stepped out of the room and into the chaos. The hallways were filled with the sounds of gunfire, the flashing lights of explosions, and the stench of smoke and burning metal. The Draxar were everywhere, tall, armored beings with weapons that seemed to hum with energy. But Elias fought with a calm that Seraphia admired. He didn't flinch when a Draxar soldier came charging toward them, swinging a massive weapon. Instead, Elias moved with precision, disarming the alien with a quick, decisive strike. It was unlike anything Seraphia had ever seen. As they fought their way through the station, Seraphia felt a newfound respect for Elias. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol of humanity's strength. They didn't rely on superior technology or overwhelming firepower. They relied on their will to survive. And in that moment, Seraphia understood something important. Humanity's true power wasn't just in their weapons, but in their spirit. And together, they would fight to protect it. The battle aboard the station had reached its peak. With every passing minute, the intensity grew. The Draxar were relentless, their weapons blazing through the station's halls as they sought to crush the peace efforts and seize control of the space station. Seraphia, following Captain Elias Storm, felt the weight of the situation bearing down on her. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a test of everything she had believed in. The power of the Galactic Empire seemed insufficient in the face of such an enemy. The once indomitable confidence she had felt as an heir to the throne began to crumble, replaced by an unsettling truth. The Empire's technological superiority wasn't always enough to guarantee victory. Elias, however, remained calm. He moved with the precision of a seasoned soldier, his movements fluid and quick. Every shot he took found its mark. Every corner he turned, he anticipated the enemy's next move. He was everything Seraphia had admired about humanity. His courage was unwavering, and despite the odds, he never faltered. She was beginning to see him in a new light, not just as a protector, but as someone who carried within him the essence of what made humanity so unique, the ability to fight even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As they moved through the corridors, fighting off waves of Draxar soldiers, the situation became even more dire. The station's central systems were failing, and the communications network had been compromised. Seraphia couldn't reach her father, the Emperor, or any of her commanders. They were alone in a station that was on the brink of collapse. Elias didn't hesitate. He pushed Seraphia forward, his voice steady as he shouted above the noise of gunfire. "We need to reach the station's core. It's the last place with enough power to keep the shields up and protect the civilians." Seraphia nodded, her heart pounding. She had never been in a position like this before. As the future ruler of the Empire, she had commanded armies, led negotiations, and wielded immense power. But now she was vulnerable. The realization that the Empire's might didn't guarantee safety was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet Elias, a human soldier with no superweapons or advanced technology, was leading them through the chaos. His courage, his unwavering belief in survival, was more powerful than anything she had ever known. As they made their way to the core, an explosion rocked the corridor. The force of the blast threw them both to the ground, and the world spun around Seraphia. She could hear Elias's voice shouting, but the ringing in her ears made it hard to focus. She struggled to rise, her vision blurry as she tried to get her bearings. The heat of the explosion still lingered in the air, and she could see the shadows of the Draxar forces advancing toward them. "Seraphia." Elias's voice was clear, full of urgency. "Get up. We need to move." Shaking off the daze, Seraphia managed to push herself to her feet. Elias was already up, scanning the area, his weapon raised. She could see the determination in his eyes, the resolve that had kept him alive through countless battles. For the first time, Seraphia felt a deep sense of gratitude toward this human who had put his life on the line to protect her and the people aboard the station. Without wasting any more time, they sprinted through the wreckage, heading toward the central core. The explosions continued to shake the station, and the walls were beginning to crumble. Seraphia could hear the shouts of soldiers and the distant thrum of enemy ships outside. The station was falling apart around them, but Elias pressed on. The core was their only chance. When they finally reached the core, They were met with a terrifying sight. The Draxar had breached the final line of defense, and the area was swarming with their soldiers. Elias wasted no time. He signaled to Seraphia, motioning for her to follow his lead. With a quick, decisive move, he took out the nearest enemy soldier, his aim perfect as always. Seraphia, though inexperienced in combat, followed his example, shooting with precision as she helped clear the path. As they fought their way through the last of the Draxar soldiers, Elias paused for a brief moment, his eyes meeting Seraphia's. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we can get to the main console and activate the emergency power systems, we can take control of the station." Seraphia nodded, determination flooding her. They were so close, but the danger was far from over. They sprinted toward the control panel, their path now a gauntlet of enemies. The Draxar were relentless, but Elias was faster. He cleared a path, ensuring Seraphia's safety as they approached the console. With a final push, they reached the control panel. Elias immediately began typing in commands, his fingers moving with precision as he bypassed the security systems. The lights flickered as the emergency power kicked in, but it wasn't enough to stop the Draxar. They were still advancing, their weapons raised. Just as the console began to power up, a Draxar commander appeared, stepping into the room with a menacing grin. He was tall and imposing, his armor shining in the dim light. Seraphia instinctively stepped back, but Elias stood his ground, his weapon trained on the enemy. "You won't take this station," Elias said, his voice calm yet filled with resolve. The Draxar commander laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You're outnumbered. You're wasting your time." But Elias's gaze never wavered. He was fighting for something more than just survival. He was fighting for humanity's future. He was fighting for the people on this station, for Seraphia, for the galaxy. In that moment, Seraphia understood something. This was more than just a battle for control. This was a battle for hope. And Elias, the human soldier, was the symbol of that hope. The Draxar commander advanced, but before he could strike, Elias fired a precise shot, taking down the enemy with a single blow. The Draxar commander crumpled to the ground, and the remaining soldiers hesitated, uncertain of what to do next. Seraphia's heart raced as the console came online, and the station's power systems roared back to life. The emergency shields activated, and the Draxar forces were forced to retreat, their plans thwarted. As the dust settled, Seraphia stood beside Elias, her breath heavy with adrenaline. She looked at him, her mind racing. The battle was over, but the revelation had just begun. She had witnessed firsthand what made humanity truly powerful. Not the weapons they wielded, not the technology they controlled, but the strength of their spirit. Elias had shown her that power was more than just control. It was resilience, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. Seraphia felt a deep sense of respect for this human soldier, but she also felt something more, something she couldn't ignore. The battle had ended, but their journey together had only just begun. The station was eerily silent after the chaos of battle. The hum of the emergency power systems and the faint hiss of air vents were the only sounds that remained. The once thriving space station, filled with bustling activity and life, had turned into a war zone. Now, with the Draxar forces retreating and the power systems back online, it seemed as if the immediate danger had passed. But both Seraphia and Elias knew this wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. Elias Storm, the human soldier who had been the pillar of strength through this nightmare, stood near the central command room, eyes scanning the wreckage of the once pristine station. His mind raced, calculating every potential threat, every possible escape route, and the next moves the Draxar would make. He had seen battles like this before, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemies more determined. And now, Seraphia, the princess, the heir to the galactic empire, was depending on him. When they finally reached the core, they were met with a terrifying sight. The Draxar had breached the final line of defense, and the area was swarming with their soldiers. Elias wasted no time. He signaled to Seraphia, motioning for her to follow his lead. With a quick, decisive move, he took out the nearest enemy soldier, his aim perfect as always. Seraphia, though inexperienced in combat, followed his example, shooting with precision as she helped clear the path. As they fought their way through the last of the Draxar soldiers, Elias paused for a brief moment, his eyes meeting Seraphia's. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we can get to the main console and activate the emergency power systems, we can take control of the station." Seraphia nodded, determination flooding her. They were so close, but the danger was far from over. They sprinted toward the control panel, their path now a gauntlet of enemies. The Draxar were relentless, but Elias was faster. He cleared a path, ensuring Seraphia's safety as they approached the console. With a final push, they reached the control panel. Elias immediately began typing in commands, his fingers moving with precision as he bypassed the security systems. The lights flickered as the emergency power kicked in, but it wasn't enough to stop the Draxar. They were still advancing, their weapons raised. Just as the console began to power up, a Draxar commander appeared, stepping into the room with a menacing grin. He was tall and imposing, his armor shining in the dim light. Seraphia instinctively stepped back, but Elias stood his ground, his weapon trained on the enemy. "You won't take this station," Elias said, his voice calm yet filled with resolve. The Draxar commander laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You're outnumbered. You're wasting your time." But Elias's gaze never wavered. He was fighting for something more than just survival. He was fighting for humanity's future. He was fighting for the people on this station, for Seraphia, for the galaxy. In that moment, Seraphia understood something. This was more than just a battle for control. This was a battle for hope. And Elias, the human soldier, was the symbol of that hope. The Draxar commander advanced, but before he could strike, Elias fired a precise shot, taking down the enemy with a single blow. The Draxar commander crumpled to the ground, and the remaining soldiers hesitated, uncertain of what to do next. Seraphia's heart raced as the console came online, and the station's power systems roared back to life. The emergency shields activated, and the Draxar forces were forced to retreat, their plans thwarted. As the dust settled, Seraphia stood beside Elias, her breath heavy with adrenaline. She looked at him, her mind racing. The battle was over, but the revelation had just begun. She had witnessed firsthand what made humanity truly powerful. Not the weapons they wielded, not the technology they controlled, but the strength of their spirit. Elias had shown her that power was more than just control. It was resilience, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. Seraphia felt a deep sense of respect for this human soldier, but she also felt something more, something she couldn't ignore. The battle had ended, but their journey together had only just begun. The station was eerily silent after the chaos of battle. The hum of the emergency power systems and the faint hiss of air vents were the only sounds that remained. The once thriving space station, filled with bustling activity and life, had turned into a war zone. Now, with the Draxar forces retreating and the power systems back online, it seemed as if the immediate danger had passed. But both Seraphia and Elias knew this wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. Elias Storm, the human soldier who had been the pillar of strength through this nightmare, stood near the central command room, eyes scanning the wreckage of the once pristine station. His mind raced, calculating every potential threat, every possible escape route, and the next moves the Draxar would make. He had seen battles like this before, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the enemies more determined. And now, Seraphia, the princess, the heir to the galactic empire, was depending on him. Seraphia stood beside him, her face a mask of calm, but inside, she was a whirlwind of emotions. The human soldier had proven himself in ways she hadn't imagined. What was supposed to be a simple meeting to help establish peace between their worlds had turned into a nightmare. Elias had saved her life more times than she could count, and now, the mission wasn't just about survival. It was about saving the galaxy. But the weight of her responsibility as a princess, as the future ruler, pressed down on her like a heavy mantle. She had always relied on the power of the Empire, on the advanced technology and weapons that were at her disposal. But now it was clear that no amount of technology could save them from the looming danger of the Draxar. The Draxar forces hadn't retreated in defeat. They were regrouping, preparing for their final assault. And they were determined to take the station, to finish what they had started. Elias turned to her, his voice low and urgent. "We need to set up defenses and prepare for their final push. If we don't act quickly, they'll overwhelm us." Seraphia nodded, her eyes meeting his. The princess had learned a lot in the past few days, about herself, about her people, and about the resilience of humanity. She had seen Elias face impossible odds and push forward with unwavering determination. But now it was her turn to step up, to lead. She wasn't just the princess of the Galactic Empire anymore. She was part of a larger cause, and it was time to fight. Together, they moved quickly through the station, gathering the remaining troops and strategizing their defense. The Draxar were no longer just an enemy to be defeated. They were a threat that had to be eliminated once and for all. If they didn't, there would be no safe place left in the galaxy for anyone. Elias led the way, clearing corridors and securing important locations, while Seraphia coordinated with the other military personnel, giving orders and overseeing the setup of weapons and barricades. The tension in the air was palpable. Every soldier on the station knew that this was their final chance to stop the Draxar. There would be no more reinforcements, no more chances. It was all or nothing. The Draxar would either take the station or humanity, and a galactic empire would survive. Elias was focused, but his mind kept drifting back to Seraphia. There was something about her, something that had changed since they first met. In the beginning, she had been distant, a princess concerned only with diplomacy and politics. But now, after everything they had been through, she was more than that. She was strong. She was brave. She had stepped up when it mattered the most. Elias had seen many leaders in his time, but few had shown the courage that Seraphia had. She had a fire inside her that he hadn't expected from someone of her rank. She wasn't just the heir to an empire. She was a warrior. As they reached the command center, the final countdown began. The Draxar were coming. Fast. Their ships could be seen approaching in the distance, their massive forms casting shadows over the station as they prepared for their final assault. Seraphia's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at the monitor, watching the enemy ships close in. The last line of defense was ready, but would it be enough? Elias turned to Seraphia, his eyes intense. "Are you ready?" For a moment, Seraphia hesitated. The weight of the galaxy seemed to rest on her shoulders. But then she looked at Elias, at the man who had fought beside her, who had saved her life, who had made her believe in something bigger than herself. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and nodded. "Let's finish this." The station shook as the Draxar forces arrived, their ships pounding the shields with relentless fire. The final stand had begun. The battle raged for hours. Waves of Draxar soldiers came, one after the other, but each time they were pushed back. Elias and Seraphia fought side by side, their movements synchronized, a testament to how far they had come together. The princess fought with a newfound strength, her every move fueled by the lessons she had learned in these past days. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting her people, the galaxy, and everything she held dear. And Elias was there, fighting alongside her, every step of the way. But the Draxar were relentless. Their numbers seemed endless, their weapons more advanced than anything the station had encountered. The station's shields began to flicker under the heavy barrage, and the defensive systems started to fail. Elias and Seraphia knew that they couldn't hold them off for much longer. They had one last chance. In a final act of desperation, Elias signaled for the last offensive. They had to take the fight to the enemy. Elias looked at her, his expression thoughtful. I think we can. We have to. The galaxy needs it. You've got the heart, Seraphia. You've got the vision. And I'm not going anywhere. Seraphia smiled at him, the weight of leadership pressing down on her, but she found comfort in Elias's words. She wasn't alone anymore. She had allies. She had people who believed in her. Together, they had overcome impossible odds. Now they had the chance to rebuild from the ashes. As the days turned into weeks and then into months, the station slowly transformed. It became a hub for peace talks, a center of diplomacy between human and alien civilizations. The once feared station was now a symbol of unity, of what could be accomplished when enemies laid down their arms and worked together. And at the center of it all stood Seraphia, the princess who had found her purpose in the midst of chaos, and Elias, the human soldier who had helped her find it. But the road ahead was not without challenges. There were still factions that wanted to see the Empire restored to its old ways, that sought power and control. And there were still humans who held grudges, who feared the alien influence. The galaxy was not healed overnight. But with each passing day, the bond between humans and the galactic empire grew stronger. With each passing day, the hope for a peaceful future grew brighter. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon of the station, Seraphia and Elias stood together once again, looking out over the expanse of stars. They had come a long way from the beginning, two strangers, thrown together by circumstance, now standing side by side, leading a new beginning for the galaxy. Do you think we'll ever be able to fully erase the scars of this war? Seraphia asked, her voice soft. Elias looked at her, his expression determined. Maybe not. But we'll try, and we'll make sure that no one ever forgets the lessons we learned. That's the price of peace. Seraphia nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face it. With Elias by her side, they would face whatever challenges came their way, together. The battle had been fought, the war had ended, and a new beginning was just starting. The stars, once a distant reminder of the unknown, now held the promise of a brighter future. And as long as they fought for it, peace would endure.